So today I'm going to share a little bit about the utility network migration project that we have going on at the City of De Pere with the assistance of Avineon. Specifically, I'm going to share a little bit about a phase we just completed. This is an ongoing, I shouldn't say ongoing, it's an in-progress project, so I'll share a little bit about our training and system testing, which is what we just wrapped up. So specifically, I'm going to first give a brief utility network overview, then dive into some of our training needs, go more in depth into our testing phase. That'll kind of be where the heart of this presentation is. Then I'll share a little bit about what it was like adapting to a new editing environment, and then I'll wrap up with the current progress of the project and leave you all with some takeaways. So first, about us at the City of De Pere. We are located in northeastern Wisconsin, just south of Green Bay. The city has a population of about 25,000. Our GIS team is small but mighty. We're a team of two, myself, and we also have a GIS analyst. We maintain many data sets for various city departments, including an extensive sanitary, stormwater, and water utility network data set, and all three of those are what we're in the progress of migrating over to the utility network. So a little about us, part two. Like I mentioned before, this is a project that we are tackling with Avineon. Here's a little bit about them. I'm not going to go too much in depth, but Tyler with Avineon is here if anybody wants to talk to him later about their company. But it's been a really great collaborative project so far, and a lot of what I'm going to share today is a direct result of that collaboration. So a lot of these ideas aren't new. This is the first kind of big system migration implementation project that I've ever worked on. So I rely heavily on their expertise, but then also, like I mentioned, this is a collaborative project, right? So they kind of help us work with what would work best for us as this implementation is moving along. So briefly, a little bit about the utility network. Here's just a quick little screenshot of some of our sanitary data, just to show stormwater data to show some connectivity. But the utility network, though, it's this transition away from the geometric network, and it relies heavily on standardized data models. There's a lot of different groupings for your data. But one reason why we wanted to move to the utility network is because it takes advantage of the connectivity that we've already spent so much time on. We spend a lot of time on making sure our points are connected to our lines, and that the data is as clean as possible. So that's one of the reasons why we wanted to move on to the utility network. So to kind of set the baseline of where we were at coming into this project, I'm just going to share a little bit about the training that we had. And I mean, before this project even started a few years ago, I took an Esri online instructor-led class about the UN. And like I said, that was a few years ago. So I mean, it just kind of gave me a glimpse into what the utility network is and what it could be and what it can do for us. We also had training that was provided by Avineon. That was something that we had worked into our contract and that we tackled last fall. We sat in on a few sessions with Avineon to learn about the UN, how we're going to be able to edit in it, what that's actually going to mean for us. But we also utilized online videos and Esri help documentation. I mean, there was no like one-stop shop because the utility network is so big and so massive that just getting perspective and ideas from all these different sources was super helpful for us. So this kind of lays the groundwork, right, for what our knowledge was coming into this. Myself and our GIS analyst, we had edited data in the geometric network, but never in utility network. So that we needed, we needed that knowledge to move into it. So now I'm going to spend a decent amount of time talking about our testing phase, or our UAT, user acceptance testing. This was something that we completed probably a few weeks ago as part of this project. We spent a solid 6 weeks or so basically just testing everything. So the way that it worked was that Avineon had loaded some, I don't want to say sample data, but a test data set of our data onto our systems, and then we had free reign to go and play with it and test and make sure it worked and see if the data models that we had spent a ton of time developing were, if they were right, if there were any errors, if there were things that needed to be tweaked. So 6 weeks was a significant chunk of time. And it was also the first time that we actually got to dive into actually editing in the UN. So there was a lot of learning that was happening. But I'm going to just touch on 4 kind of key considerations that we went through that was super helpful for us. And again, as the first time that we're going through a bigger system implementation like this. And the first is checklists and tasks. So we worked with Avineon to develop kind of this big picture checklist. Like when we're testing this phase, before telling Avineon like, yes, let's work through this go live phase, like what do we want to ensure that the data does, and what the UN is doing for us. So first we have to test if we can load our data successfully from Avineon over onto our system. The next thing is, can we edit successfully, right? Because that's kind of the heart of maintaining the UN, is being able to edit all of our features. And then for presentation, can we view the data in public maps as well as internal maps? And when I say we, I actually mean others in our organization, right? Someone who doesn't have maybe the admin credentials or whatnot. And then we also have to understand the overall performance of the UN. How does it work? How does it function? So that's kind of our the 4 big things that we wanted to make sure to accomplish with our testing phase. And so now, thinking of editing, right? Like I keep saying, this is kind of like the heart of maintaining the utility network. What kind of editing tasks do we want to be able to accomplish in the UN? Well, first we need to make sure to check all utilities. Like I said before, we're migrating sanitary, stormwater, and water data sets. So we want to make sure that we can edit all utilities. We want to be able to handle all types of requests that may come into us from primarily our engineering staff. So whether that was, we tested doing a full street relay, we tested a small attribute updates, and we wanted to make sure to cover all parts of the city. Was something, is there like a really weird part of a city where, maybe there's like a lot of, maybe not weird, but like is there a lot of abandoned pipe, and making sure that we kind of cover all the different scenarios that we could possibly encounter when making updates when we do fully have the UN deployed on our systems. So keeping these ideas of what we want to accomplish in mind, we then also have to track it. And we have to properly track it. And with this being a partner project, it's not just tracking it for our own sake to fix, it's to communicate out with Avineon what's going on, what needs to be fixed or tweaked in the data models. So we developed this as a Word doc that we put up on SharePoint that we could all edit back and forth. So if we're editing in this test space and we notice something was weird, we can note it down, what utility was it with, who noticed it, and the severity where, like, okay, do we have to fix this before we fully deploy, or can this be something that we tackle afterwards? So here's one example of one of the issues that I found was in our stormwater data that the elevation data field was set to short and not double. And so when I say elevation, we don't model in 3D. It's more of an attribute that's collected in the GPS data that we receive from our engineering staff. So that data is typically in our source data set is out to like 3-4 decimal places. But when we brought it into the UN, it was set to the wrong data type so that we weren't able to see any of our decimal places. So our data wasn't migrating over exactly as it should have been. So that was something that I marked as a high severity that we needed to address before fully deploying. And it has since been fixed by Avineon. So we had marked that as closed. So the final 2, I guess, considerations, as I'm calling them here. The first one is something that we did definitely consider and kind of have in the back of our minds before we started UAT. And then the second one I'll leave you with is kind of a funny story of something that I kind of wish you would have put a little more thought in beforehand. So the first is knowing your data. So in this picture here is our stormwater data, and each, I guess, piece of data is in the geometric network was its own feature class. So storm fittings were one feature class, manholes were one feature class, end walls, catch basins, those are all their own feature class. But I kind of alluded to this before, that in the UN, the data is grouped a little bit differently. So I'm just going to focus on three. There's about 5 or so, but for today I'm just going to focus on stormwater junctions, stormwater lines, and stormwater devices. So the best way to think about this is how the commodity flows through the network. So what are the functions of each of these pieces of information, and how does that impact how, in this case, stormwater goes from point A to point B? So with lines being our pipes, junctions are kind of just the interconnections between the pipes, and stormwater devices are they have more of a function. They play more of a role in the UN. So this was something that was super important for us to keep in mind as we're testing, and what will help us moving forward when we fully deploy, because it's different, right? It's a slightly different way of thinking. It's where you find data and how the data actually works. And then, so moving on to this fourth consideration, something that, we knew that the UN was different. We kind of knew a little bit, how it functions, but truly knowing the UN is something that, it would have been nice if we would have kind of thought about it a little more, but this is a great learning experience. So imagine that we have this is again a stormwater example, and we have this point here. And the way that our process works is we receive data from our engineering department, and then the GIS staff goes and updates the utility data. And so if this was a field inlet or a lateral or something that, or like the end of a lateral, that our engineering staff could GPS that for us. So that's a true known point. So even when we're editing an ArcMap, that's our starting point, because it's the truest, most known piece of information that we have. What we don't know is, in this case, if this was either a tap or a T, we don't know where that actually is, because it's a subsurface feature. That's just our process, where we don't get that data GPSed from our engineering team. So, there's various considerations that we make, but I guess the best way to sum it up is that if we don't necessarily have the data to get from the point to the tap or a T, we just draw a perpendicular line. It's probably just the easiest way to represent it. And then at the end, then we would add the fitting, the actual point. And so as we're testing this in the UN, I'll go back a little bit. So that point there, that is where a pipe meets a pipe. And we were testing, and we're like, we can't snap. Like, we're not getting prompted to be able to snap to line. So we totally blew up our tracking document for Avineon with this can't snap, that can't snap, that can't snap. Well, if you kind of think back to what I was talking about a little bit before, how the UN, it functions with how a commodity flows through. So how our stormwater is flowing from point A to point B. Well, the stormwater would never go from pipe to pipe. It just wouldn't. There's something in between there. There's this, the junction, or this, the tap or the T that goes pipe to tap to pipe. So what we thought was an error is actually just a workflow shift, thinking of how to edit and how the UN operates. And so this is a great learning experience for us. And you might be like, well, okay, so what is the workflow shift? How do you solve that if the UN doesn't like to go, pipe to pipe, and then you add your fittings later? Well, that's where group editing templates come in, which is, it's nothing new to the UN. It's a standard ArcGIS Pro thing. And with the group editing template, we are able to, let me back up here a little bit, we're able to have a point, have a pipe, and then end with the other point there. So that's how we're able to still kind of still do our workflow, but still be in terms of the UN. So that kind of sums up our UAT, our testing phase, and kind of the nuts and bolts of that. But then in general, thinking of transitioning to this new editing environment, right? So we've kind of been late adopters to ArcGIS Pro just by fact that, we couldn't edit all of this utility data until we got into the utility network. So editing was something that I was probably the most nervous about. I'm like, what is it going to be like to edit the utility data in the UN? And we slowly started transitioning some of our other, like for our planning department and all these other departments. So we have experience editing in Pro. It's just not the full-on utility data. And I was thrilled to learn that editing the utility network is basically the same as regular ArcGIS Pro editing. It's just your basic edit toolbar, because you're still editing points, you're still editing lines, you're still editing polygons, and I was absolutely thrilled to learn that. And like I said, that was my biggest worry, is how am I going to actually click the buttons to do this? So something that was more of a process shift is more of these utility network or our UN functions. So probably about 90% of working in the UN was with our typical editing toolbar. But there is a new toolbar for utility network. And so I won't go through all of these. The ones I have highlighted are ones that we did touch a little bit when we were going through our UAT process, thinking of validating and inspecting errors and ensuring topology. Those are kind of main things in the UN that we got experience with right off the bat. And then something like traces, that's something I'm really excited to dive into a little bit more. And terminal connections, that was something that's new to me, where we thinking of either like a lift station or a pump. It's what are the pipes doing as they're coming in and going out? Like which pipe is the in, which is going out? What's going on there, and having to set those. So that was something that was new to me, but it makes sense now, understanding how the UN actually functions. So another process shift that I want to talk about is branch versioning. So branch versioning is a requirement of the UN, or this idea of service-based editing. We were coming from a traditional versioning environment, so we never went through any kind of reconcile and post workflows, but that is what we will be doing now. And that is it took some getting used to, ensuring that that you're in your right branch or you're in your right version. And I even kind of made a mistake the other day, and I was like, oh shoot, I think I'm actually editing in default. So I'm going to make a big sign and put it on my wall that says, make sure that you choose your right version there. Make sure you're in your right version, which is it's actually a step trickier for me, who will be serving as the admin on this, because if we do have protected branches or enable a QA/QC system, I might be reviewing multiple other branches, so I need to make sure that I have my Pro project set up for either specifically reviewing or just ensuring that I make sure to switch over to the proper branch for when I do editing, or proper version when I do editing. So that kind of sums up what our experience was like with this, what I call this new editing environment. It's definitely new to us, and it's been different. It's been an adjustment, but it's all good in the end. So I do want to touch a little bit on what our progress is, right? Because I said that this is a currently underway project. So here's just a quick little screenshot of some of our sanitary data. So I would consider us being live-ish. And what I mean by that is that we have our sanitary and our stormwater data set up in our public and our internal viewer apps. Water is ready to go too. It's a little different, so I have to do a few more tweaks to that before getting that on there. We are working on our final cleanup, and that will allow us to have full functionality with the UN. So kind of like what I was saying before about with pumps and lift stations, identifying the purpose of the pipe, is it coming and going out? So setting all those controllers and all those terminals, I guess you could say, is something that we're working on right now, so that we can fully utilize the UN and be able to run traces and do everything it allows us to do. And a final piece of our project is SOPs, or standard operating procedures, which is a document that it's something that is in our contract with Avineon that we want to tackle, because this is right, like I said, this is new. This whole big system implementation is super new, and we've had an Esri enterprise agreement since 2018, but this year was the first year that we actually spun up portals. So this is the first time that we're truly utilizing like the full capabilities of our enterprise agreement. So we want to make sure that we have documentation on what tags to use and how to assign a new user, or what departments and what permission levels should people have if they want to do what tasks. And just kind of having the standardized documentation will really help us moving forward, especially now that we have Portal as well as having the UN. So my final slide here, I want to leave you with some takeaways, some, I guess, big picture things that we learned so far along this project, and especially going through our UAT testing phase. And the first is pretty obvious, that testing is vital when implementing the UN or any kind of big system integration project like this. But what's really important is that organized testing is where you'll be successful. So for us, working with Avineon, especially when we've got a team of 3 from Avineon, and then 2 on the city side, as well as some subject matter experts that we utilize on our project. That there's a lot of people, right? There's a lot of moving pieces, and the UN is its own big moving piece enough. So making sure we have the goals in the larger, or in the tracking documents, that'll help the overall larger project. Another important takeaway for us was that we didn't want to just race through this. Like I said, it was a solid 6 weeks that we spent on testing, because we had 3 different utilities to test. And so ensuring that we slowed down and made sure that we asked for help, rather than like, oh yeah, we'll figure that later when we go live. I was like, no, I need to be able to manage this when Avineon turns the keys over to us officially. So and they've been super respectful about that, and like answering all my questions and making sure that we take the time, because I have a responsibility to the city to be able to implement this correctly. So it's been super great that we've had the opportunity to do that. And then finally is just practice, right? Like I said, before we started UAT, we hadn't clicked any buttons in the UN, which, that makes sense. It's the nature of what it is, but just getting that time, getting those clicks in, getting those mouse scrolls, right? Getting that time in the UN is what's really helped us have our UAT be successful, and it's definitely going to help us too when we do fully go live, hopefully in the next couple of weeks here. So with that, I will take any questions if anybody has them.
How much schema change would you say you had to do to make it fit utility network?
Yeah, so it's a good question. So we didn't do too much schema change because as part of our contract, it was kind of like a one-to-one. Like we wanted to make sure whatever we started with is what we ended with. There were a few things that we did have to change just by nature of the UN. We used to keep track. Well, I don't know why it was set up like this, but we didn't have like editor tracking enabled, and so some columns were just like it was like a text field that you would put in like who updated and when. So that kind of had to be migrated slightly differently over. Like we'd get rid of that column and then fully utilize editor tracking. So that was probably one example of something that changed. But overall, though, I guess the main goal was just to do a one-to-one transition over as best as possible while fitting within the proper groups of the UN.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
What are supposed to be the perks of keeping your utilities in a network rather than just keeping them tracked accurately?
So kind of like why are we going full on into the UN? Mm-hmm. And yeah, okay. So I kind of mentioned before about we spend a lot of time on connectivity and ensuring that our pipes and lines, everything's all connected. The UN has a lot of advanced analysis functions that we want to take advantage of. One of my favorite ones is tracing. So you can, so like if, for example, if there was a water main break and our water department staff could plunk a point on a pipe, and then you could get all of the pipes selected around it up until the next valve that would potentially have to be shut off. So there's, that's just one example, and I know there's many more that I haven't even had a chance to dive into yet, but that's probably one of my favorite examples of, just going full on into the UN.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Are your field workers, the engineering department, are they using? You said they collect data with GPS and send that to you. They're not using field maps or anything right now, or is that happening?
Yeah, so our water department is using field apps or field maps for a few different things. And one of my goals with this project is to get them more updated data more frequently, right? Because they're kind of in a disconnected environment a little bit, even though they do use field maps. So I want to try to sync things up a little bit more. But the water department has probably been our biggest adopter of that.
And that all integrates with the utility network? Like if they were to collect some information in the field, that would pull right in?
So yeah, it kind of depends. The branch versioning thing, to my understanding, kind of throws a little bit of a wrinkle in that, just because of how all the versioning works. And then also too, because right now our workflow is that the GIS team is the primary editor. At some point, I would like to get to pass on some of the editing to more of those subject matter experts, right? Just for time's sake and sort of reducing errors and and questions and things like that. But that's right now we're not there yet. But hopefully in the future we can move that way. Yeah.
Any other questions from anybody? Otherwise, thank you, Kristen.
Thank you.